It was Thanksgiving morning, and I thought this year would be different. I had spent the whole week preparing, baking pies, roasting the turkey, making everything perfect for my daughter and granddaughter. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasted chicken, warm and inviting. I imagined hugs, laughter, and smiles, but the moment I stepped inside, I realized nothing could have prepared me for what was coming. She looked at me with eyes I barely recognized. My own daughter. Her face was tight, her lips pressed in a way that told me she was angry or worse, disappointed. "Mom, I think it's time you left," she said, her voice icy, cutting through the cozy holiday air like a knife. I froze, the plate of mashed potatoes trembling in my hands. What do you mean?" I asked, though my heart already knew. I had spent decades loving her, raising her, worrying for her, and now I was being thrown out on Thanksgiving. She didn't hesitate. I said, "Leave. Now, I don't want you here. Not today. Not ever again." The laughter and chatter from the living room suddenly felt like taunts mocking me. My granddaughter looked at me with confusion and fear, and I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to scream, to beg, to cry, but I couldn't. I simply nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped toward the door, trying to steady the storm of emotions crashing inside me. The tears from falling. I didn't understand why this was happening. Was it money? A fight I had forgotten? Or something far worse? My mind raced with questions, none of them giving me answers. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to fall into a darkness I couldn't see. And then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, but something told me to answer. "Hello." A distorted, almost whispering voice. "Is SB." Officers were moving toward the door. And my daughter froze, panic washing over her face. She tried to speak, to explain, but the documents in the officer's hands silenced her. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. What could have happened in just 1 hour that turned our home into a crime scene? I stood in the cold, heart pounding, watching as the woman who had once been my little girl, my pride and joy, trembled under the weight of consequences she hadn't and anticipation them. Something inside me whispered that this was only the beginning and the truth finally was about to be revealed. I didn't know the full story yet, but as I watched her frozen in fear, I realized what I was about to discover would change everything. I stood in the cold November air, my hands shaking as the flashing lights of the police cars painted the night in red and blue. I could barely believe my eyes. My daughter, my own child, was inside, facing off. Even though we're coming, I wanted to rush in, to demand answers, but something held me back. My instincts told me to watch, to see what was really happening before I stepped into a storm I might never escape from. The officers entered the house, and I could hear murmurs, voices low but urgent. My daughter's panic was palpable. She clutched her phone like a lifeline, whispering into it, trying to explain herself. But the expressions on the officers' faces said it all. Something that had finally caught up with her. I felt my chest tighten. Part of me wanted to feel joy at her predicament, but another part, my motherly heart, ached with sorrow. How could it have come to this? Then a knock at my own door made me jump. I hadn't even noticed I'd left it slightly ajar. I hesitated, but when I peeked through the crack, I saw a man in a suit holding a folder with, "Ma'am," he said, "I believe you were listed as a beneficiary of fraud and embezzlement that's connected to your daughter's accounts. You may be able to recover what's yours, but it's urgent we talk." I felt a chill run down my spine. My daughter had thrown me out, humiliated me, and yet it seemed she had also been stealing from me deliberately, methodically. Years of hard work, savings, trust, all manipulated while I thought I was helping her, guiding her, loving her. Unconditionally, my hands trembled as I took the documents. There were bank statements, contracts, evidence showing her deceit. Every line, every number screamed betrayal. I didn't know whether to cry or rage. My mind spun, trying to piece together how she could do this, how someone I had nurtured since birth could plot such a cold, calculated plan against me. And yet there was clarity in the chaos. I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. I had the evidence now. The person who had tried to destroy me could be held accountable. But the danger wasn't gone. I could feel it lurking like a shadow ready to strike again if I misstepped. As I glanced back toward the house, I saw my daughter's face through the window. Her eyes were wide, frozen with fear. She hadn't expected me to know the full truth, hadn't expected anyone to intervene so quickly. I realized then that this was my chance, not just to reclaim what was mine, but to make her understand the weight of betrayal. I didn't want to hurt her without purpose. I wanted justice. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I hesitated, knowing it might be more trouble. But curiosity and urgency won. I answered, and a calm, measured voice said, "If you act wisely, you can get everything back. But be careful, they are watching every move you make." I froze, watching her trembling behind the glass. Hearing that, and this time, I wasn't going to lose. I didn't yet know who was really behind the betrayal, but one thing was clear. My daughter wasn't acting alone, and the next move could destroy everything, including me. I decided to wait in my car across the street, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I watched the police slowly file out of my daughter's house. Their faces grim, serious, confirming everything I had feared. Part of me felt a strange, quiet relief that the truth was finally coming to light. The thought I knew my daughter, every nuance, every secret, every dream we had shared. But now I realized I had been blind for years, unaware of the lies she had woven around me, the manipulations that had slowly stripped me of my dignity and peace. The investigator had handed me a folder filled with documents proving the depth of her deceit, fake contract, and I realized that everything she had accused me of being unreasonable about, every disagreement we had ever had been part of a carefully planned betrayal. I felt my hands shake as I read line after line, evidence of how she had stolen from me, humiliated me, and then pretended to be innocent, all while smiling and laughing in my presence. I thought of the countless holidays we had spent together, the birthdays, the family dinners, the nights I had stayed away, and now it all felt like a cruel joke. My mind raced with questions and fury, but then a realization hit me harder than anything else. She hadn't acted alone. There were transactions, communications, and transfers that could not have been done without help. Someone else was involved. Someone who had been manipulating her, guiding her, making sure I stayed blind until the moment she thought she could strike. The thought made my blood run cold, but it also ignited a fire inside me. I knew I couldn't confront her yet, couldn't act hastily, because whoever was behind this was watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. I had to be patient, clever, and precise. I couldn't allow my anger to destroy the one chance I had to reclaim everything, to make her understand the cost of betrayal, and to ensure that my justice was served. I sat there in the cold, gripping the folder, feeling the weight of years of pain and betrayal crushing down on me. And then my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I hesitated, heart pounding, but when I answered, a familiar, chilling voice whispered, "They know you're awake now. Be careful what you do next." I spent the night in my car, staring at the lights of my daughter's house fading in the distance, replaying every moment in my mind, trying to understand how the person I had nurtured and loved so fiercely could betray me so completely. Sleep refused to come, replaced by a churning confusion and heartbreak that gnawed at me from the inside. My mind went back to the years of sacrifice, working double shifts so she could have private school, staying up nights when she was sick, ignoring my own health to make sure she never wanted for anything. And now all of it seemed meaningless. I couldn't believe the calm, smiling woman I had raised was capable of forging documents, siphoning money, and planning a calculated humiliation against me. And holding proof, knowing the evidence of her betrayal was undeniable. I thought about confronting her directly, storming back into the house and demanding an explanation. But a deeper instinct told me that this was bigger than one conversation, bigger than a mere confrontation. I needed a plan, patience, and strategy if I wanted to reclaim everything and expose not just her, but anyone else who had pulled the strings behind the scenes. The first rays of morning sun painted the streets in pale gold, but instead of hope, they brought clarity. She wasn't alone in this. I could see it in the financial records, the bank transfers, the cryptic messages hidden in her phone records. Someone had guided her, someone who had carefully orchestrated every move, so that I remained blind until it was too late. That realization was both terrifying and empowering. Terrifying because the person or people behind this were powerful. Empowering because it meant that once I uncovered the network, I could dismantle it piece by piece and make sure the betrayal cost them everything. I spent hours going through every piece of evidence in the folder, analyzing every transaction, every signature, every email, looking for patterns, clues, anything that could point me toward the accomplices who had helped her. It was painstaking, exhausting work, but with each discovery, my anger fueled a meticulous clarity. By noon, I had A rough map of her operations, the people she had involved, and the weak points where I could strike. I realized I couldn't trust anyone blindly, not even people I thought were allies. Deception could be hiding behind familiar faces. My phone buzzed again, another unknown number, but this time curiosity overcame caution. When I answered, the voice was soft but chilling. "Stop digging or you'll regret it. You've already gone too far." My stomach sank, ignited in me. I realized then that fear had no place in my plan. I had been humiliated, betrayed, and cast aside. But now I had the truth, the proof, and the patience to turn everything around. I closed the folder, feeling the weight of it in my hands, knowing that what I was about to do would change all our lives forever. And just as I prepared to make my first move, a shadow appeared at the edge of my car window, and I heard a voice I never expected. "We need to talk now." At my car window made my heart skip a beat. I froze, gripping the folder tighter as a familiar yet unexpected face appeared in the dim morning light. It was my daughter's ex-boyfriend, someone I had always mistrusted, the one I had warned her about countless times, and now he was standing there, his expression unreadable, his eyes sharp and calculating. "We need to talk now," he said, his voice low, carrying an urgency that sent shivers down my spine. I hesitated, every instinct screaming that this could be a trap, that stepping forward could pull me deeper into a storm I wasn't yet ready for. But curiosity, that dangerous blend of fear and determination, pushed me out of the car. I had spent the last 12 hours piecing together her betrayal, mapping out her lies, and now I realized that someone had been orchestrating it all from the shadows. He led me down a side street, glancing over his shoulder as though someone might be watching. "I didn't expect you to survive the night," he said, and I felt the sting of realization. He knew more than I imagined, perhaps even more than my daughter herself. I demanded to know why he was here, what he wanted, and how deep this conspiracy ran. But he only smiled faintly, shaking his head. "It's bigger than you think. She didn't act alone. You need to see the list. Names, dates, accounts, all of it." My hands trembled as he poured it over, yet I could feel the weight of it in my hands. The weight of truth, danger, and potential revenge. I opened it cautiously, flipping through pages that revealed more than I wanted to see. She had allies, people I had once trusted, friends and distant family members who had fed her schemes, helped her cover tracks, and ensured I remained blind until the moment she thought she could strike. Rage bubbled inside me, a hot, burning mix of grief and fury that made my hands clench into fists. Every memory of laughter, of love, of trust now felt tainted, poisoned by deceit. I realized that confronting her directly was no longer enough. I needed strategy, patience, and precision, because every wrong move could cost me everything and possibly my life. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "If you want revenge, if you want justice, you can have it, but you must play carefully. One wrong move and then..." Imagine, my stomach twisted, but I felt a surge of resolve. I had been humiliated, betrayed, and abandoned, yet here was my chance to reclaim everything and to make sure they all understood the cost of crossing me. The cold wind bit at my skin as I folded the folder, tucking it under my arm, and I realized the first move had to be clever, invisible, and lethal in its impact. And just as I was about to leave, a sound behind me made my blood run cold, the crunch of footsteps on gravel, deliberate, coming closer. And I knew in that moment that someone had been following me all along, waiting for me to make my first mistake. I froze as the footsteps drew closer, my pulse hammering in my ears, the folder pressing like a weight against my chest, threatening to betray the truth it held. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I knew that running would only make me vulnerable. The shadowy figure stepped closer, and at space, my heart sank. What are my daughter's so-called friends, someone I had invited into our home countless times, always thinking they were trustworthy, now standing before me with a smug, knowing smirk? "You really shouldn't have come alone," he said, his tone deceptively casual, though there was an edge of menace lurking underneath. I felt a mixture of fear and fury boil inside me, hot and sharp, ready to erupt. How many of the people I had trusted, loved, and welcomed into my life had been working against me? I thought about the years I had sacrificed, the nights spent worrying, the holidays filled with laughter and love, all of it now twisted into a cruel game that I had unknowingly been part of. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm, even as anger coursed through my veins like wildfire. "I'm not alone," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I have the proof, and I know everything you've been doing. Their smirk faltered for a fraction of enough to give me a sliver of confidence. I pulled out the folders, the one from the investigator, the one from my daughter's ex, and held them tightly. Everything, I repeated, letting the weight of the word hang in the cold air, hoping it would make them realize that I wasn't the same person they had underestimated all these years. For a moment, silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, broken only by the distant sound of traffic and the faint. Then he laughed, low and chilling, the sound slicing through the tension like a blade. You think holding pieces of paper changes anything? He sneered. You have no idea what you're up against. My hands shook, but I forced myself to meet his gaze. I realized in that moment that fear wasn't an option. I had been betrayed, humiliated, and cast aside, but now I had clarity. I had the truth, the evidence, and the drive to make them pay. Slowly, I backed every move, calculating, planning my next step. He followed, and I could see that he wasn't acting alone. There were subtle signs, quick glances over his shoulder, the way his hand hovered near his coat pocket, and I knew he had backup waiting, someone unseen, ready to strike if I made a mistake. My chest tightened, and I felt the cold seep into my bones, but determination burned brighter than fear. I had endured betrayal, I had been cast aside, but now it was the plan and patience, and I knew that one wrong move on their part would give me the opening I needed. I reached my car, sliding into the seat, keeping my eyes on him as he stopped just short of the curb, smirking, knowing that this confrontation was only the beginning. And then my phone buzzed again, another unknown number, and when I answered, a distorted voice whispered, "They're closer than you think, and they've already set the trap for you." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white as the words from the unknown caller echoed in my mind. "They're closer than you think, and they've already set the trap for you." My eyes darted to the shadows along the street, the parking lot, every alleyway I could see, trying to catch a glimpse of anyone following me. Every instinct screamed danger, yet the determination inside me had solidified into something colder and sharp.
I had to act carefully, strategically, and most importantly, I had to uncover exactly who had orchestrated this web of deceit. The folder in my lap, filled with documents, bank statements, and evidence of my daughter's betrayal, suddenly felt like a weapon, a key to exposing not just her, but everyone who had conspired behind my back. I thought of her face the night she threw me out, her eyes hard and unyielding, and a mix of sorrow and fury surged inside me. How could someone I
had nurtured, protected, and loved unconditionally turn so cold, so calculating without a shred of guilt? The realization hit me harder than any slap. She had been molded, influenced, coached by someone else all along. Someone who knew my weaknesses, who knew my loyalty, and had manipulated her to strike at exactly the right moment. My phone buzzed again, this time a text message. A picture of my daughter laughing in a restaurant I had never been invited to. Recognized immediately her mentor, the one I had warned her about, the one who had always been suspiciously present during family events. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the extent of the betrayal. This wasn't just about money or humiliation. This was about control, manipulation, and a network of deceit that had trapped me in a cage I hadn't even realized existed. My heart pounded as I parked my car, realizing that I needed to follow the trail, and that I was aware. Every step I took from here had to be deliberate, calculated, and flawless. I couldn't afford mistakes. One wrong move and everything could collapse. The evidence, my plan, and perhaps even my safety. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, I noticed a small black car slowly rolling past, its windows tinted, the driver watching me with an unsettling calm. I ducked behind a lamppost, heart racing, and realized they had been following. My hand shook, but a cold, determined fire ignited in my chest. I had been humiliated, betrayed, and cast aside, but now the power had shifted. I had the truth and the patience to use it. I could rebuild, strike, and expose every lie that had been laid against me. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that fear could no longer control me, and I reached for my phone once more. When I answered, the voice on the other end was calm. My blood run cold. Tonight, you will see everything. But be careful, what you uncover might change your life forever. Night had fallen, and the streets were quiet, almost too quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath for what was about to happen. I kept my car in the shadows, watching, waiting, my heart pounding like a drum that refused to stop. The weight of the folders in my lap reminded me that I held the power. Now, betrayal.
But power was dangerous when misused, and I knew that one misstep could destroy everything I had fought to uncover. I glanced at my phone again, the message from the unknown caller still flashing on the screen. Tonight you will see everything, but be careful, what you uncover might change your life forever. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Whoever this person was, they knew the depth of the web I had been trapped in, and I knew they had a plan, and I was now a piece
on their chessboard. I remembered the laughter, the warmth of past Thanksgiving dinners, and how quickly it had all been replaced by betrayal, humiliation, and danger. My daughter's face flashed in my mind, her once bright, innocent eyes now hardened, cruel, and manipulated by someone far more sinister than I had ever imagined. I knew I had to act, but stealth and patience were my only allies now. I slipped out of the car, moving along the alleyways, keeping to shadow the folders tightly. Every step I took, I felt eyes on me, and I wasn't wrong. The same black car from earlier rolled past. Slowly, the headlights dimmed, the driver's gaze sharp and unnerving. I ducked behind a dumpster, holding my breath, realizing that they were testing me, watching for any sign of panic, any slip that could give them the upper hand. My mind raced as I pieced together the information I had gathered: her ex-boyfriend, the accomplices, pointing to a conspiracy that was bigger, more dangerous than I could have imagined. I realized I couldn't confront her yet, couldn't expose everything until I had a plan that would protect me and guarantee the truth came out without backfiring. As I crouched there, I noticed movement across the street, a figure approaching cautiously, carrying a small bag, their steps deliberate. My heart skipped a beat as recognition hit me. It was my granddaughter. What was she doing out here at this hour? And why was she moving so quietly? Before I could react, her phone rang, and she looked at the screen in panic, whispering to herself, I can't, they're watching. I realized then that she knew more than I had imagined, that she had been caught between her mother's schemes and the truth I had uncovered. I wanted to run to her, to protect her, but instinct screamed that this was part of the trap. My pulse raced, fear mixed with determination, as I realized that the moment I reached her, everything could explode: the lies, the danger, the betrayal, and maybe even my life. I froze, watching her, knowing that what happened next could change everything. And then in the shadow of the streetlight, I saw a figure step out behind her, silent and deliberate, and my stomach dropped as I recognized the face of someone I had trusted for years. My heart stopped as I recognized the face stepping out of the shadows behind my granddaughter. It was my daughter's closest friend, the one I had always trusted, the one who had laughed alongside us at family gatherings and pretended to care. My stomach twisted in fear and disbelief. How many of the people I had called friends had been part of this twisted conspiracy, this web of lies that had been carefully woven around me for years? I wanted to shout, to run, to grab my granddaughter and flee, but instinct told me to hold still, to watch, to observe. Because one wrong move could set off a chain reaction I couldn't control. My granddaughter froze, clutching her bag tightly, looking terrified as she whispered something I couldn't hear, her eyes wide, reflecting the dim streetlight. My mind raced, trying to process everything. The folders, the evidence, the black car that had been stalking me, the warnings from the unknown caller, and now this new figure moving silently, purposefully, as if she had rehearsed every step. I felt a surge of anger mixed with helplessness, a painful combination that made my chest tighten and my vision blur with tears I refused to let fall. I realized that my daughter and her accomplices had underestimated me, assumed I would be too shocked, too broken, too loyal to act, and that miscalculation gave me a sliver of power. I could use it, but I had to be careful, cunning, and deliberate. Every instinct screamed danger, yet beneath that fear, determination burned hotter than ever. I edged closer, keeping low, the cold concrete pressing against my knees as I silently moved to a better vantage point. My granddaughter looked around nervously, stepping backward, and I could see that she was torn, caught between loyalty to her mother and the instinct that told her something was terribly wrong. My daughter's friend raised her hand suddenly, and I realized she wasn't coming toward me. She was signaling someone else, someone unseen, as if I had walked into a trap I didn't even
know existed. Panic surged, but I forced myself to stay calm, focusing on the evidence I had, the folders in my lap that contained everything I needed to turn the tables. I reminded myself that patience was my weapon, that rushing would play into their hands, and that I had endured betrayal and humiliation before this was only the beginning. Then the silence of the night was shattered by a sudden phone buzz in my pocket. I fumbled to answer it, my hands trembling, a voice, cold and
controlled, whispered, "If you move now, everything ends tonight. But choose wrong and it will be your last mistake." I froze, the words echoing in my head as I looked around. Shadows shifted. A figure emerged from the darkness behind the friend, and my blood ran cold as I recognized another face I had once trusted. Someone I had confided in, who had now betrayed me completely. I realized then that the trap was already set, and the only thing left was to survive long enough to
Turn the tables. I froze, my breath caught in my throat as the two figures stepped closer, the shadows of the night making their movements deliberate and menacing. My granddaughter's eyes filled with tears, and I could see the fear radiating off her, a reflection of the same helplessness I had felt when my own daughter had thrown me out of her home. Every instinct screamed for me to protect her, yet I knew moving too quickly could trigger something catastrophic. I clutched the folders tighter, feeling the weight of the evidence like armor against the betrayal surrounding me. The friend smiled, a twisted, confident smile that sent a chill down my spine, while the other figure, someone I had once trusted implicitly, remained silent, their eyes cold and calculating, watching me as if I were a pawn in a game I didn't fully understand. My mind raced, trying to piece together their plan. Then, in this web of manipulation, I realized that every step I had taken so far had been anticipated, that every folder, every move had been designed to lead me here, into this confrontation. Panic rose, but I forced myself to stay calm, to breathe and to think, because I knew the smallest miscalculation could destroy everything. My evidence, my granddaughter, and even my own safety. Slowly, keeping my eyes on them, searching for any sign of hesitation, any weakness I could exploit. My phone buzzed again, and I hesitated before answering, knowing it could be another warning or a trap. When I finally picked up, the voice on the other end was cold, controlled, and impossibly calm. "This is the moment you've been waiting for. Decide carefully, because one wrong move and everything you've worked for ends tonight, and they're already watching your next step." My pulse spiked, my hands shook, but a fire ignited inside me that pushed away the fear. I had been humiliated, betrayed, and cast aside, but I was no longer powerless. I had the truth, the proof, and a plan beginning to form in my mind that could unravel the web around me. The two figures in front of me exchanged glances, and I noticed a subtle signal, a nod, a shift, a barely perceptible movement that told me they were about to make their first move, and I knew that whatever happened escalate beyond anything I had imagined. My granddaughter whimpered softly, clutching my coat, and I felt an intense surge of protectiveness, determination, and rage all at once. I realized that I had to act, not out of impulse, but with precision, and that the moment I did, the course of everything, betrayal, revenge, truth, would shift irrevocably. I took a slow breath, calculating, observing, and just as I readied myself to move, I caught a flat figure closer than I had realized, stepping toward us with a deliberate, silent menace. And I knew in that instant that the trap was complete, and escaping it would be far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. My heart raced so violently I thought it might burst as I saw the third figure emerge from the shadows. The cold night air amplifying every sound, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the subtle rustle of leaves, the shallow pressed against my side. I realized then that this was no longer just a confrontation. It was an ambush, carefully orchestrated by people I had once trusted, people who had studied me, watched me, and calculated every move I would make. The folders in my hands suddenly felt heavier than ever, laden not just with evidence, but with the weight of betrayal, anger, and a resolve that had been building for months. My daughter's closest friend stepped forward, her face twisted, while the other figure I had trusted years ago now loomed closer, their eyes cold and predatory. I felt fear surge, a hot, choking wave, but beneath it, a new determination hardened like steel inside me. I realized that I had spent years being blind to deception, naive to manipulation, but now I had clarity, proof, and patience on my side. I couldn't rush, couldn't panic, or else I would play right into their hands. The threat, my mind racing for every possible escape or leverage point. My granddaughter's whispered questions. "Grandma, what's happening? Are they gonna hurt us?" cut through me like knives. I wanted to comfort her, to shield her from the pain I had endured, but I also knew that this was bigger than just immediate safety. I had to expose the truth, protect her, and ensure that justice, my revenge, and the full weight of their betrayal would finally reach them. I took a deep breath, calculating each heartbeat, each movement, and then the phone buzzed again. Another unknown number flashed, and when I answered, a voice, calm but chilling, said, "Move carefully or tonight you'll lose everything, including what you love most." My pulse spiked. I had known that danger was close, but hearing it so directly, so personally, made it undeniable. The figures in front of me exchanged subtle signals, and I realized that they were about to act, to strike, to end whatever chance I had to turn this around. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to act, but I forced myself to remain silent, watching, waiting, planning my move. My granddaughter tugged at my sleeve, terrified, and I whispered that I had a plan, that she needed to stay quiet, and that the moment was coming when everything would change. The first figure lunged suddenly, a motion fast and precise, and I realized in a horrifying instant that the trap was closing, that the uncovered was only part of what I was about to face, and that surviving this night and emerging with the truth, the proof, and the revenge I had been waiting for would demand every ounce of cunning, patience, and courage I had left. Time seemed to stretch as I crouched behind the shadows, my granddaughter clinging to me, trembling, while the three figures in front of us moved with a precision that made my blood run cold. I realized with a sinking feeling that every taken tonight, every plan I had tried to make had already been anticipated by them. The folders I held the evidence, the proof of betrayal. The lifeline I had spent days gathering felt suddenly fragile in my hands, as if one misstep could see it ripped from me, along with my chance to reclaim everything that had been stolen. My daughter's closest friend stepped forward, her eyes glinting with a cruel triumph, while the other two figures flanked us. The moment I showed any sign of weakness, my granddaughter whispered something under her breath that made my heart twist in a way that pain alone could not describe. She knew fear, and she looked to me for guidance, protection, and courage, and I knew that I couldn't fail her, not now, not ever. I forced myself to focus, to breathe slowly, to measure every movement, knowing that impulsive actions could destroy everything, and I realized that revenge had to be patient and unstoppable. I had endured humiliation, betrayal, and abandonment for far too long, but now I had clarity, evidence, and the determination to strike back in a way that they would never anticipate. Slowly, I edged to the side, keeping my granddaughter close, positioning myself so that the shadows protected us while I analyzed every possible escape route, every weak point, every clue that could turn the tide. The phone in my pocket buzzed, screamed, and I answered, my pulse racing. The voice on the other end was calm, almost eerily so, but carried a threat that made my stomach churn. They've set the stage. Move wrong, and tonight ends differently than you hope. Watch closely or you will regret it. I swallowed hard, feeling fear, anger, and resolve mixed into a cocktail that left my chest tight but my mind sharp. My eyes scanned the figures in front of them, glanced over his shoulder, and I realized that the ambush had a blind spot. A gap I could exploit if I acted with precision. My hands tightened around the folders, and I whispered to my granddaughter to stay silent and trust me that everything was going to change, that the betrayal that had haunted us for years was about to meet its reckoning. Then, with a sudden, deliberate movement, one of the figures stepped closer, breaking the fragile tension like a match to paper, and I knew deep in my bones that the moment of confrontation, revelation, and revenge had finally arrived. But whether we survived it and how far the truth would reach remained to be seen as shadows closed in around us. The night air pressed against my skin like ice as I realized that every second I delayed, the trap around us tightened, and my granddaughter's grip on my coat reminded me of the stakes. We weren't just fighting for revenge anymore. We were
Fighting for survival.
I could see the three figures moving with synchronized precision, like predators circling their prey. Each step calculated, each glance a signal, and it made my blood run cold. Yet beneath the fear, a burning clarity formed. They had underestimated me, assumed that humiliation and betrayal had broken me, and that I would be too timid to strike back, too shocked to think strategically. I took a slow breath, forcing my heart to steady, and remembered folders clutched in my hands, the tangible proof of their crimes and my daughter's manipulation. Realizing that these were more than paper, they were ammunition, leverage, and the key to turning the tables in ways they couldn't predict. My granddaughter's wide, frightened eyes met mine, and I whispered that we had to be patient, that the moment was coming when we could expose everything, when the lies, the betrayal, and the hidden hands behind it all would finally face the consequences they deserved. I edged closer to the shadows, careful not to reveal our position. watching for any sign of hesitation or weakness. And that's when I saw it, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement from the figure in the black coat, a twitch of a hand near the pocket, a signal to the others, and I knew instinctively that a weapon or trap was about to be revealed. My pulse spiked, my chest tightened, but the fire of revenge burned hotter than the fear, and I realized that this was the moment I had been preparing for all these months, the moment when patience, evidence, and cunning would collide with their arrogance. I whispered instructions to my granddaughter, guiding her to stay silent, stay calm, and trust me because any noise could trigger disaster. The friend who had once smiled so smugly stepped forward, her confidence almost radiating in the dim light, and I noticed the slight shift in the other two figures. They were waiting for her signal, and I understood that if I hesitated even for a second, the opportunity to strike back, to reclaim what had been stolen, and to finally make them pay would vanish. My phone buzzed again, a new unknown number flashing, and I answered without hesitation, the voice on the other end low and urgent. "This is your only warning. Act now or you will lose everything, including the one you are protecting most." My stomach lurched, but my resolve solidified. I had endured betrayal, humiliation, and manipulation. Now the pieces were in my hands. I adjusted my stance, gripping the folders tightly, eyes locked on the figures in front of me. And just as I began to take a step forward, the black-coated figure lunged suddenly, the movement faster than I expected, and I felt a jolt of terror and adrenaline as the trap finally snapped shut around us. And I realized with chilling clarity that the night had only just begun, and the true test of survival, revenge and revelation, to thicken around me as the black-coated figure lunged. And my heartbeat thundered in my ears, echoing the adrenaline that surged through my veins. Every instinct screamed danger, but I forced myself to remain calm, to calculate, to anticipate their moves, while keeping my granddaughter close, her trembling body pressed against mine. The friend stepped forward, her smirk fading slightly as she realized I wasn't paralyzed by fear. I had patience building for months, and now it fueled every decision, every movement. The third figure shifted, signaling to the others, and I realized with a sinking horror that the trap was multi-layered, far more sophisticated than I had imagined. Yet my mind sharpened with clarity. I had spent years being deceived, but I now understood the patterns, the hidden signals, the manipulation, and I would use it against them. My hands tightened around the folders, silent, to trust me that the moment to reclaim everything was here. I saw a flash, a pocket knife, a sudden motion toward us, and I reacted instinctively, shifting our position and narrowly avoiding the first strike. The figures froze, eyes narrowing, realizing I wasn't just scared, realizing that I had anticipated their moves. The fire of betrayal, humiliation, and rage surged inside me, and with it came clarity. This was no longer every deception, every hidden accomplice who had manipulated my daughter and tried to destroy my life. I moved deliberately, carefully, exploiting the blind spot I had noticed earlier, and I felt the surge of power that came from knowing the truth, from holding the evidence that could unravel the network of betrayal around us. My granddaughter clung to me, her eyes wide, but I could sense a spark of hope in her fear, a realization that we might survive. Had once seemed untouchable glared at me, fury flashing across her face, and I knew that she had never expected resistance, that she had never calculated for the strength that came from truth, patience, and righteous anger. Then, my phone buzzed again, and when I answered, the voice on the other end was chilling, calm, and full of menace. "Tonight, everything changes. Don't make a mistake or you'll lose her." My stomach dropped, fear warning, like all the others, was simply a challenge, a test, and I was ready. Slowly, I edged closer to the black-coated figure, every sense alert, every movement precise, as I prepared to strike, not with brute force, but with the leverage of truth, evidence, and the years of betrayal that had finally sharpened my mind and my resolve. Just as I made my first calculated move to take control of the confrontation, a shadow darted from the... I felt the air explode with the presence of someone else I had thought was gone from my life. Someone whose arrival changed everything in an instant, leaving me and my granddaughter teetering on the edge between survival and disaster. The moment froze around me as the shadow from the side street landed in front of us, and I recognized the face that had haunted my thoughts for months. My daughter, her eyes wide with shock, fear, and something I had never seen before, guilt. For the first time, the arrogance, the cruelty, the smugness that had fueled her betrayal all these years wavered, leaving her exposed, vulnerable, and human in a way that cut me to the bone. My granddaughter looked between us silent, sensing the tension, and I realized that everything had led to this: the evidence, the patience, the months of betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak, all culminating in this one moment where truth and justice could finally collide. The black-coated figure and the others froze, caught between disbelief and the realization that the tides had shifted, that the power they thought they had over me had slipped through their fingers. I stepped forward slowly, the folders clutched tightly in my hands, and with every step, I felt the years of pain, anger, and humiliation transform into a controlled, calculated force, one that I would use not recklessly, but with precision, to dismantle the web of lies that had surrounded me for so long. My daughter's voice trembled as she tried to explain, to justify, to push back, but I held up the folders, letting the truth speak for itself. The forged documents, the manipulated bank statements, the secret alliances, every deceit laid bare in black and white. Her closest friend and the others flinched as they realized that their cover had been blown, that the meticulous plans, the ambushes, and the manipulation were now powerless against the weight of evidence and the fire of someone they had underestimated. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and finally spoke, my voice calm but sharp.
You thought you could break me, humiliate me, control me, but the truth has a way of finding its mark. My daughter's face crumpled and I saw tears, but not just of fear, there was recognition, shock, and the bitter taste of consequences she had never expected.
Slowly, methodically, I began exposing every lie, every accomplice, every hidden hand that had orchestrated this betrayal. And I watched as the carefully built walls of arrogance, manipulation, and cruelty began to crumble around them. My granddaughter held my hand tightly, and I whispered that we were finally safe, that the nightmare that had shadowed us for so long was ending. The black-coated figure tried one last desperate move, a sudden lunge, but the police, tipped off in advance, appeared from the shadows, their presence swift and decisive, surrounding the conspirators and leaving them
no escape.
Relief and a strange sense of triumph washed over me as I realized that justice had arrived, not through revenge alone, but through patience, truth, and courage. My daughter fell to her knees, sobbing, and I finally understood the full measure of what had been lost, the pain of betrayal and the bitter cost of arrogance. I embraced my granddaughter, holding her close as the night's chaos faded into the cold calm of reality, knowing that the battle had been won, that the lies had been exposed, and that the scars, while permanent, had been transformed into strength. And as the flashing lights of police cars lit up the night, I whispered to myself quietly but firmly, "They can't hurt us anymore. And now, we begin again."